In the autumn of 1903, in the shadow of the Beartooth Range, Marta Voss performs a task that stops every passing wagon. She is stuffing her walls with dead moss, not mud, not sawdust nor the plaster every other sensible homesteader uses. Sphagnum moss pulled from the creek beds and dripping armloads is packed into the gaps until her fingers are raw. Tom Brierly pulls his horse team to a halt. He owns the best frame timber house in all of Stillwater County. He cups his hands and shouts across the field, "Marta, you gone simple? That into wall, that's a nest." Marta does not look up. Beside Tom, his wife Margaret leans forward, her eyes filled with a sad pity. They drive on. Marta packs another fistful of moss, pressing it deep with a wooden tamping stick she carved. Marta has 42 feet of wall left to fill. The northwestern sky turns a killing gray-white, signaling the cold. Marta understands the coming storm. She possesses an ancient knowledge of survival that the local homesteaders completely lack. In 1896, she arrived from the Masovian lowlands, carrying a trunk, a Bible, and a folded land claim. Her ancestors built with moss for generations. This wisdom is passed between women like a sacred recipe. Her husband Georg loved cattle but hated the cold. Together they saved money to build their dream. George died in 1902 from a wire fence infection. Marta sat with him until the ground thawed. At 29, Marta had only $112.43 cattle and a cabin leaking precious heat. A letter from the bank in Hardin arrived in March. Payments on the land claim were due every spring. Selling 11 cattle covered the fall payment. But if the herd dwindles, the land will eventually be lost. This fear is the wound beneath her work. Marta packs moss in November to protect George's legacy. Georg built this cabin in 1901. It was meant to have double walls, but he never finished them. Though they burned their entire wood supply and survived on green pine. On the coldest nights, the cabin reached 34 degrees. They slept in their coats just to stay alive. George died before he could finish the outer wall. Marta spent the winter of 1902 in the same half-finished condition. Her cattle suffered in a pole barn that offered nothing but a meager shelter from the biting Montana winds. This fall, before the first snow, she traded her labor for rough-sawn pine at the Absaroki mill. The outer skin goes up in a week. She leaves a precise 4-inch gap between the inner and outer boards. She measures this gap with a 4-inch rod. The consistency of this space is vital for her survival. She walks to the north bank of Stillwater Creek, where thick mats of sphagnum moss grow in abundance. Pulling it in armloads, she heaps the moss into her wagon until it can barely move under the weight. On the south side of the cabin, she spreads the moss on sore horses to dry in the thin sun. The smell of drying moss fills the yard, a clean green scent mixed with mineral notes. She packs the moss while it still holds softness, following her grandmother's ancient tactile wisdom. Using a 12-inch flat tamping stick, she presses each handful deep, building meticulous insulating layers. The hollow sound of tamping deepens and deadens as the moss fills the empty, resonating space. She reads the wall's density by the sound and the physical resistance against her aching wrist. Sphagnum is remarkable. Its hollow cells hold water when wet and insulating air when dry. This is why old European houses stood for centuries, protected by walls of living air. Still air does not conduct heat. It moves by molecules touching, resisted by widely spaced air. 10,000 tiny pockets of still air in the moss prevent heat from escaping via convection. Though she knows no modern terms, Marta calculates that 4 inches of moss equals 12 of pine. Marta isn't guessing, she is remembering. But in the second week of packing, setbacks arrive. Heavy horizontal rain drives under the unextended eaves, soaking a completed section of the north wall. Before the rain, her notebook recorded 41 degrees inside against 12 degrees outside in the cold. Marta fears the dampness will ruin the insulation, causing the internal temperature to plummet once more. Marta pulls the wet, sodden moss out in handfuls, checking the inner pine boards for any signs of rot. She spreads the moss on drying boards again, pressing her palm into each section to locate hidden wet pockets. She loses 4 grueling days and nearly her temper. but she breathes through the frustration in the mud. Marta stands in the rain, breathing slow and hard, then picks up her tamping stick to resume her work. On the east wall, she finds a seam gap wide enough to see light through, a perfect entry for wind. She patches the gap with canvas strips soaked in a boiled mixture of linseed oil and ash to create sealant. In late October, a packed section of the south wall settles, leaving a 2-inch void at the top. Marta unpacks the top 8 inches, repacks it with fresh compressed moss and nails, a thin batten to secure it. Marta lost 5 days to setbacks, but gained an intimate knowledge of the moss. By November, she is halfway done. Clyde Putter, a sheepherder with a face the color of old wax, rides over to watch her work. Mice, Clyde says, letting the word hang. He warns that her moss wall will become a rotting mouse hotel. Marta explains that sphagnum's natural acidity discourages vermin. It has protected European homes for 1,000 years. Clyde sniffs at a millennium of tradition, dismisses it as error, and rides away into the brown fields. The physical toll accumulates silently. Marta's weight drops to 123 pounds. Her dress hangs loose. Her shoulders ache consistently. Her right hand has a tremor noticed only when holding a cup still. She works from dawn until dark. Her savings are low. Her cattle herd shrinking toward financial ruin. On November 14th, the sky carries a white-gray weight. Marta senses the storm and works faster. Tom Brierly watches from his wagon as Marta, 6 feet up on a scaffold, packs moss. "Storm's coming," Tom warns. "I know," Marta replies. Tom shakes his head. "You ain't going to finish." "I will finish." Marta speaks the words with a quiet, terrifying certainty, never stopping her work. Tom Brierly, a survivor of 7 Montana winters, watches her with the eyes of a realist. "Come to our place if it gets bad," Tom says. "We got room." Marta offers her thanks. Marta works through the night without a lamp, saving precious oil by relying on her touch. At 3 in the morning, the temperature hits 22 degrees. Her breath rises in the moonlight. She sleeps on the floor, rising to eat cornbread and drink coffee thick enough to hold a spoon. On the afternoon of the 15th, unexpected help arrives as Marta struggles with the final walls. Marta walks around the cabin, once pressing her palm flat against each ice-cold outer wall board. Inside, she presses her palm against the inner boards. They are not cold. She finally knows. She boils a pot of venison stew and shares it with Hannah as the wind rises. At 9 o'clock, Marta records the temperature in her notebook, 18 degrees above zero. A day of quiet stillness follows, with a pale blue sky and shimmering mountain snow. Marta seals every roof seam with linseed paste, working diligently during the final day of calm. She stacks 3 weeks of firewood against the interior wall, a pile nearly as tall as herself. She banks the cattle with hay and nails, old feed sacks over gaps in the barn. The cattle are restless, pacing the barn in a slow, heavy way. The old people say they know. Tom Brierly's house shows smoke from both chimneys. He carries wood with an urgency. Marta clearly recognizes Tom's woodpile is lower than it should be. Marta watches him, a good man, doing all he knows. Clyde Putter's sheep huddle in their leaky pen of poles and tar paper, generating heat to survive the night. Marta counts the sheep through her field glass, 41 in total. She hopes they have enough to survive. Marta banks the iron stove and prepares for sleep. She records the final temperature, 12 degrees at 10. The storm arrives at 4 in the morning, with a sudden bone-deep drop in atmospheric pressure. Marta wakes as the temperature inside reaches 48 degrees. The iron stove burning down to embers. Then the wind hits a physical blow from the northwest at nearly 60 miles an hour. The cabin groans under the force, the stovepipe singing a high note as windows bow inward. By 8 in the morning, the thermometer reads negative 16 degrees amidst horizontal blowing snow. Visibility drops to 30 feet. Marta cannot see the fence line or Tom Brierly's distant smoke. She builds the fire carefully with seasoned lodgepole pine, allowing the iron stove to heat up. The cabin responds slowly as the thermal mass of the moss-packed walls absorbs the stove's heat. Outside, negative 16. Inside, 58. Marta records the massive 74-degree difference in her notebook. By noon, the external temperature hits negative 23. Inside, the thermometer shows 61 degrees. The storm continues building. Marta feeds the stove medium pieces and listens to the wind. Marta allows herself a small private smile, the first reward after 6 weeks of grueling labor. At 3 p.m. outside 31, inside 63. Her survival math is now undeniable and life-saving. She writes the numbers down and underlines them twice. The arithmetic of survival is finally complete. Above the wind's roar, Marta hears a sound she hoped to never hear again, panicked bellowing. The cries of suffering cattle come from Tom Brierly's direction, a quarter-mile into the whiteout. Marta wrapped scorched long wool scarf around her face, leaving only her determined eyes visible. The wind hits like a physical blow. Marta leans into the white, counting her frozen steps. 14 steps later, she finds the barn door by feel, dragging it open against the gale. Inside the barn it is 34 degrees. Her herd stands calm, huddling for communal warmth. Marta breaks a thin crust of ice on the water trough, allowing her cattle to drink. Pushed by the wind, Marta returns to her cabin and leans against the door, breathing. At midnight on the second night, the external thermometer reads a lethal -41 degrees. Marta feeds the stove steadily but moderately. The internal temperature has not dropped below 60 degrees. Through sub-zero plunges to -41, Marta remains mathematically 52 degrees warmer than the killing air. She writes it down and circles a number, then lies down in her clothes to sleep. Tom Brierly arrives not to borrow wood, but because he fully expects to find Marta dead. Tom calculated her failure, one woman alone, a small woodpile and walls like a bird nest. He spent 18 hours imagining Marta frozen beside a dead stove, her savings still on the shelf. Tom's cabin dropped to 32 degrees. He burned the kitchen chairs to keep his family alive. Margaret wrapped the children in quilts, telling stories while Tom watched his cattle suffer and die. On the third day it was -44. Tom looked at his empty wood box. Tom walked to Marta's door to offer help to a corpse knocking with a heavy heart. Marta opened the door in her shirt sleeves. A fog of warm air exhaled into the cold. A low fire burned. Steam rose from the coffee cup in her bark-stained, trembling hand. Tom Brierly stood in the doorway, mouth open, gray from cold grief and profound shame. I figured you'd be. Tom's cracked voice failed him as he stared inside. Tom cannot finish the sentence. He stands in the warmest cabin in the county during the worst cold of the decade. Marta steps back and invites him inside. Come in, Tom. It's warm, she says simply. Tom brings his family, Margaret and the 3 children, carrying broken furniture and chair legs for fuel. They feel the warmth settle over them like something returning to their bones that they had forgotten. Rose holds her hands out toward the stove. Mama, it ain't even going that hard, she says. 2 logs, 61 degrees inside, while outside the air is a lethal -44. A modest fire, embarrassing in any other cabin, holds a massive temperature difference behind moss-packed boards. Tom Brierly stands against the wall, jaw working. Margaret quietly asks the question, how? And Marta shows them the walls. Marta takes Tom's hand, twice the size of hers, and presses his palm against the inner board. The board is not cold. It is cool like a stone kept inside. Not like the world outside. She takes him outside. Even in that killing air, she presses his palm against the outer board. The cold is not getting through. Tom looks at the wall, then at her. By God, Marta, the moss holds still air. These ideas are older than I am by 1,000 years. Clyde Putter arrives on the 3rd morning, walking on snowshoes made of bent willow and canvas. His horse refused to go out. Clyde has been walking for 40 minutes in the lethal air. Clyde Putter's face is the color of old wax. His lips a bloodless white at the edges. His hands do not work right. Fingers curl involuntarily into claws, refusing to open in the cold. Clyde has lost 9 sheep. His pole barn was no match for -44 degrees. He spent the second night burning green wood, the smoke making his eyes run until blind. Clyde looks past Marta at the Brierly family, the modest fire and the steady thermometer reading. He looks at Marta. His voice is quiet, lacking all previous certainty. I was wrong. Marta opens the door wider. Come in, she says. The sanctuary of the moss walls welcomes him. Clyde enters the sanctuary. Marta puts hot coffee in his hands and watches the feeling return to his frozen fingers. Marta remains silent about his doubts. She lets him get warm, taking nothing the cold hasn't already stolen. The storm breaks on the third afternoon. The temperature jumps 22 degrees as a clean blue wave arrives. Marta walks her property. All 31 cattle are alive. Her cabin stands sound beneath a frost-white coat. Inside, the thermometer reads 54 degrees without a fire. Outside, the calm afternoon is -2. The moss released the heat built through 3 days. It worked exactly as it had for centuries. Marta writes in her notebook, -2 outside, 54 inside, 56 degrees warmer than the world beyond the boards. She pauses, then writes underneath, as calculated. Marta closes the notebook, her solitary struggle finally validated. Neighbors come to her in the following days. Tom Brierly arrives first, standing at her door, hat in hand. Marta shows Tom everything: the gap measurements, drying time, tamping, and the linseed oil paste. Tom asks for her help at his own cabin before next winter. Marta simply says yes. Clyde Putter comes on Thursday, mentioning his sheep in the cold while avoiding the subject directly. "I will show you the method, Clyde," Marta says. He admits he was wrong about the Europeans. "You were right about one thing," Marta says. "You should not use sawdust." Clyde almost smiles. Hannah Schultz arrives with a smoked ham and a note of gratitude from her family. Marta pins the note by Gord's photograph, honoring the grandmother's ancient life-saving wisdom. In early December, the beartooths are pure white against a deep blue post-storm sky. Marta writes to her cousin in Prussia, describing the blizzard and her successful moss walls. She shares how neighbors now seek the ancient work learned from their shared grandmother's hands. Survival knowledge isn't fashionable. It's the old habits that look like strange things to others, but the strange things are what survive. Marta seals the letter in her warm cabin. Marta sets the letter on the shelf beside Georg's photograph, where old-world wisdom has found a permanent home. The ancient knowledge held when everything new failed, surviving an ocean crossing to protect this isolated Montana cabin. Now the neighbors come, not to laugh or pity, but to learn the steady, life-saving rhythm of the tamping stick. Outside, the snow begins to fall once more, soft and silent across the vast frozen Beartooth Range. Inside, the moss-packed walls hold their warmth, patient as winter and quiet as the moss itself.